Hi, welcome to the administration training. We're glad you're here with us. When a disaster strikes, it takes many people and talents to coordinate a response. It takes people who have the gift or the vision to see what needs to be done. It also takes those who can prepare thousands of meals or those that can do cleanup and recovery. It takes believers who can pray. It also takes those with a gift of administration to help organize and document our what's going on behind the scenes so that we can get the help, hope, and healing to the survivors of a disaster as is needed. Today, we're going to have different people from our administration leadership help with this training. I'll start off by introducing myself. I'm Linda Gregory, and I am our state admin coordinator. Then, next, we'll introduce Kathy Willis, who is our assistant, our able assistant who can do most anything and is willing to do it. Our disaster relief is broken up into 7 regions in Florida, and so we have a regional coordinator for each region, and then sometimes an assistant for them for our admin. So next we'd like to introduce our region coordinator for Region 1, which is Jenny London.
Hello.
And then her assistant is Terry Davis.
Hello.
Region 2, we have Kathy Edwards.
Good morning.
And Region 3 is Vi Norris.
Good morning.
Our other administration people are on the slide. You'll also find them on our website with information on how to reach them. We hope that you'll contact your regional coordinator, get to know them if you're interested in admin, and like I say, any information that you might need, their picture and information on how to get in touch with them is on our website. Today we're going to have a few of these ladies that you saw help with this training. And what we're going to do is when it's their turn, they're just going to come and pick up and take over there. So right now I'd like to introduce Terry Davis to start us off.
Good morning. I'm glad you're interested in becoming an admin volunteer for the disaster relief. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the traits of admin volunteers. You need to be able to function in a very busy office. The office or the command center during a disaster is the hub of all the activity. We have an instant commander there, an operations lead, blue hats come in and out, a variety, maybe 3 to 5 admin people could be there, volunteers may show up, survivors may show up. And so it can be a chaotic atmosphere. The phone rings quite a bit. But if you can handle that kind of atmosphere, if you function great in that kind of atmosphere, some people do, then this may be the role for you. One of the key elements that we look for in admin volunteers is their ability to be flexible. We can plan all day long for a disaster, but things often change. And so we need you to be flexible and be willing to go with the flow at any time. Can you work with all kinds of people? Some of the people that show up are going to be really enthused and ready to go. Some of the people that show up may be a little bit reluctant, hesitant. This may be their first time to volunteer. Some of the survivors that show up could be devastated. And so you need to be able to work with all kinds of people. Are you a detail-oriented person? Can you record and report information accurately? This is very important to us. As you'll see later, we keep a lot of data. So you need to be able to do that with accuracy and be comfortable in that environment. Also, are you physically and spiritually prepared? Although this job is not nearly as stressful or physical as a cleanup and recovery job, we often end up walking lots of steps, sometimes climbing stairs. Our days can be very long. So you need to be physically able to do that kind of work. And then most importantly, are you spiritually able? Do you have a relationship with Christ? Are you in connection with Him? When that survivor shows up and wants help, and perhaps that's a single mom with 3 kids and she just had 3 feet of water in her house, if you are not in a good place spiritually, that encounter with that person can be devastating. And so it's important to be spiritually prepared, and it's important to stay spiritually in touch with God during the call-out situation. Now, admins, like I mentioned a minute ago, there's usually 3 or more admins working on a call-out, and so there's always an admin lead. Here's some of the duties associated with the admin lead. That person reports directly to the incident commander. We sometimes call that person a white hat. They're responsible for standing up and shutting down the admin office. And they're responsible for setting up and shutting down a training site. If we're having a training, we usually have 7 trainings a year, 1 in each region. This person also establishes a communications network. We typically use track phones. A lot of people use their own cell phones, but we need to have that communication with all the ministry leads. Some other responsibilities for the admin leads includes following all the financial procedures. In a disaster site, in the command center, there could be cash, there could be credit cards, there could be gift cards there. We need to track all of that, where the money comes in from, where it is spent. Someone may make a donation. We need to keep up with all that, and there are procedures that we need to follow while that's going on. The administrative lead also coordinates with the leads of all the different ministry areas, like the lead of chaplains or the lead in feeding, because they'll be gathering information from those people, and so they'll be in contact with them on a daily basis. The admin lead is also responsible for staffing the admin office and giving duties to the other volunteers that are there. And one of the most important duties that is assigned right away when we get started is keeping up with volunteers' arrivals and departures. So much is dependent on how many people we have on site, for example, how many meals to cook, that it's critical to know who's there and how many we have. That's just one example of all the records and receipts that we need to keep up with if you're in the role of the administrative lead. Now, that lead, as I mentioned, has some other administrative volunteers working with them. And these volunteers are needed to assist with regional trainings that I mentioned a few minutes ago. They're also needed for disaster call-outs. And here's a list of some of the jobs that administrative volunteers may be asked to do. Events set up, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Checking in volunteers, I mentioned. Answering the phone. We usually have a public phone number that's given out through churches, radio, first responders. And so we often have lots of phone calls coming in. Somebody needs to man those. We keep up with people. We keep up with work orders. We keep up with the hours that are spent on each job. And from time to time, administrative volunteers are asked to do other things. You may have to empty the trash. You may be asked to sweep the floor, go find paper towels. There's a number of things. And once again, it's important to be flexible and willing to do that kind of thing. This form right here is an example of one of the forms that we keep up with as an administrative volunteer. Our cleanup and recovery teams have work orders, and the blue hat on that team is responsible for keeping up with how many hours they spend on the job. Consequently, this form right here helps track that information. In a training event, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, is usually a 2-day process. We start on Friday afternoon setting up, And then the training itself typically happens on Saturday. However, there's sometimes a few classes on Friday night. Here's a list of some things that have to be done. Before we have a training event, DR leadership would have made a site visit to a church, and they would have figured out which rooms we are being allowed to use. When you get there to help, we need to know which rooms are being used for classrooms, which rooms are for sleeping, where we're going to be eating, where the general session is going to be, and signage needs to be put up, which Jenny will talk about in a few minutes, identifying each of those areas. Then on Saturday, we help with registration, which usually starts at 8:30. Supposed to start at 8:30. Oftentimes, people show up much earlier than that. We also will do badging, take people's pictures for a badge. But before they can have a badge, we need to verify that they've done their background check. And then at the end of the day, we have all kinds of stuff to pack up. All kinds of materials, projectors, slides, things such as that. We want to leave a church in at least as good or better shape than it was when we got there. When a disaster hits, there's several stages that we go through. Something like a hurricane, where we know in advance, there's plenty of planning and anticipation of what's going to happen, and our state director will notify the DR leadership of a conference call to get things going, and then the leadership will end up contacting the regional coordinators, and the regional coordinators contact the volunteers. So you can see here the stages that we go through to plan and get ready for a disaster. When it's your time to respond, make sure that you send in a roster. This is very important. We need to know who's coming and when. And also, make sure you take your badge and your driver's license, a cot or an air mattress, no bigger than a twin size. When it's your time to deploy, like I said, you need to turn in that roster. Make sure you've got medicine for at least a week. And when you arrive, check in right away. If you're not the first admin to get there, the admin lead will probably have already set up a check-in site, or ERT may have done that for us. And then we hit the ground running. Once again, we need to establish who is going to be in what area. The church will have given us a certain part of the building to use. We need to decide where the command center is going to be, where the sleeping rooms are going to be. Sleeping rooms are often divided up between feeding and non-feeding, and then of course between men and women in separate areas. If our state leadership is there, Delton Beal, Marvin Corbin, then we try to make sure that they have rooms separately for themselves. All of these things need to be done right away. ERT needs a separate room because they are using different hours. Their schedule is different. They may be sleeping during the day. And then, of course, start the admin process just as soon as possible. I've mentioned the command center. There's an example there of what the schematic may look like of where people are going to be staying. I mentioned the command center several times, and most of the time our command center is a trailer, command trailer that we use. Sometimes we're in a room in the church, but sometimes we have to make do. Remember I said being flexible? Well, here's an example one time where Kathy had to move out of the church, out of the command trailer, and she used an old hog pen. Fortunately, the hogs have been gone for a long time. And then one time before we completely remodeled the trailer, what's now our command trailer, Vi found a quiet spot, and we made her queen back there in the back. So hope that gives you an idea of what the responsibilities and the roles are of both the lead and the other admin volunteers. Jenny is coming next, and she's going to talk to us about those important signs that I mentioned.
We do have a lot of signs to post. We're going to show you some of the very basic signs that are used at just about all sites. And then there will be some additional signs that will need to be posted that will be site specific. Please remember that anytime you are posting anything on a wall or a door, use only blue painter's tape, removable sticky dots, or removable post-it notes. We do not want to damage any surface in a place where we are their guest. Sleeping rooms need to be identified just as soon as we possibly can so that people will know where to put their gear when they arrive. And if available, use sheet protectors for any signs that need to be posted outside to help to protect them from the weather. Some of the basic signs are, if I can get the clicker working right, excuse me, today is, this may seem a little bit silly at first, but believe me, after you've been there 3 or 4 days, you'll come to appreciate this sign. On rare occasions, people ask you to give weather information on it. This does not happen very often. If it's not requested, don't do any extra work that you don't have to, because you'll have plenty that is very necessary without doing any additional work, unless it's requested. If you have time, print several days in advance. I found that a lot of times Sunday morning is a good time to print the next week's signs. Then you can put those inside a sheet protector. The sheet protector is attached to the wall or board or wherever you're posting it. And then each day you can go through and just remove the top sheet and the next one is in place. It saves time and it's much more efficient to do it that way. If you're the first one on site, you must be sure what day is being considered as day 1. Usually your admin lead can provide that information to you. And then from there on, or if you come in on a 2nd or 3rd rotation, you just pick up from the last day that has been done and go in consecutive order. And then the next one that is always used is where we are. You'll be constantly needing this information for various reasons. And so it needs to be just a glance away. Most of the time we are staying in a church, and if we are, we always try and post the senior pastor or the lead pastor's name as a matter of courtesy. And then the nearest hospital. If you are in on the first response team and ERT has not already done this, then you will need to verify where the nearest general hospital is that has a 24/7 emergency room and whether or not that hospital is capable of receiving patients. Sometimes they've received damage, sometimes the city water's bad. There's various reasons that they might not be able to. So you need to locate the nearest one that is a functioning hospital and that has the facilities that we need. Of course, in case of a major emergency, you simply dial 911. But for less emergencies, then we need to know where the hospital is. ERT may already have that information. They'll also have information about law enforcement and other important numbers that you can get from them. And then these first 3 signs need to be placed in the admin office. If the white hat and the blue hats are using a different area, it needs to be placed there. They also need to be placed in the general meeting room and probably at the feeding unit also. And then we have the incident command chart. This is so the different leadership can see who is in charge or who is in the lead person for the various teams that are there. Remember that the titles will remain the same throughout, but the people are going to change as they rotate in and out. So however you prepare this chart, keep that in mind so that hopefully you won't have to redo the entire chart every time there's a change in personnel. It can be done as a large laminated chart. It might be on a white wall board. It might be sticky notes. It could be computer generated, whatever works best for the site that you are. But we need to remember to get this up as soon as we can to help with the planning. And just as the information is, on the feeding area, you may want to adjust this chart so that it contains just the feeding unit information for them. And now we are going to look at the sleeping room sign. This goes on the door or on the wall beside the door to all the sleeping rooms. You'll also need to do a daily walkthrough to make sure that everybody's where they need to be. There have been times when folks decide that it'd be nicer if they slept someplace else, and the place that they've chosen might not be an area where we want people sleeping. And so it also helps us to know how many people are there, to make plans for how many empty spaces we have for incoming teams. The date in is when the volunteer puts their bed in the room, and then the date out is when that person removes their bed in order for them to go home. So these are some of our basic signs, and as I said, there will be others that are site-specific. And now Kathy's going to come and tell us about some of our records and reports.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to get into some of a little bit more of the specifics of the reports. If I can switch. The first form you're going to fill out when you arrive is your PIF form. There are two different forms. You have a credentialed volunteer, which is your DR trained volunteers that have gone through the background or have gone through training. These forms are two-sided. Their contact information is on the front side with their emergency information and such. The back side is their hold harmless form or waiver, and it must be signed and dated and witnessed by two people. Anyone in admin can witness it for you. They cannot be witnessed by a spouse or a blood relative. Okay. The next one is a day volunteer, somebody that just shows up to help for the day. This form is filled out, they're handled the same for both forms. Once these forms are completed, you file them alphabetically in 2 to 3 different folders. You have a folder for those that are on site, a folder for those that are leaving today, and a folder for those that have gone home, what we refer to as the dearly departed. The number of PIF forms you have in your folder should match your check-in roster at all times. It seems extremely easy, but it's extremely frustrating most days. Okay. Incident reports. We have 2 different kinds of incident reports. You have your personal injury and your property damage. They are printed back to back, so you don't have to find the right form. It's always there. You need to make sure that the ministry lead fills these out as soon as an accident occurs and make sure that it is turned into the command center. Once received by admin, you need to notify the White Hat and the DR office in Jacksonville. It's best to scan this form and send it to Jacksonville, but if you cannot, make a picture with your phone and send it as good as you can, or at least call them and give them the basic information. Room capacity. This is a funny little form. Once your sleeping rooms have been decided and your capacity is determined, you can keep this sheet you can even keep it on the wall so you can see at a glance if your rooms are full. If it's a women's room, it's pink. If it's a men's room, it's blue. And this form will change constantly. You could change, we run out of room and they add more rooms. This form is going to change to accommodate that. Remember, your initial capacities when this room was assigned was calculated using twin beds. It's ever changing. The room capacity will change. So just be aware. Know it's going to change. Hopefully everybody brings a twin bed. We just hope that. Okay. The next is a little video.
Hello.
Hi,
Hi, I'm Linda Gregory.
I'm Vi Norris. It's nice to meet
Steve.
you.
Nice to meet
Nice to
you.
meet you.
Nice to meet you. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where'd you come from?
We come from the Panhandle. We heard y'all needed help, and it's been a long day. We just would like to find out where we're supposed to stay.
Oh, okay. Who did you advise that you were coming?
Well, no one. We just heard you needed help.
Okay,
Here we
I
are.
see. Okay. Well, let's see. Oh, thank you. Did your group fill out their
No, I just told
information
them
form?
to load up. When we got here, we'd do the paperwork here. I mean, that is your job, isn't it?
Yes, right. Okay. Well, we'll have to have them come in then and fill out. Well, tell me who's in your team.
Well, let's see. It's Jay and his son, and John and his wife, and Carolyn, and
Joyce and Greg and Jim.
Jim.
Okay, so 10?
That sounds about
10,
right.
Yeah, okay. So we have what, like 4 women and 6 men?
Mhm.
Okay. How are we for room there?
Well, the men is not gonna be a problem, but I'm still working on the women's, so I'll have to go down the hall and see what I can find out.
Okay. We thank you for coming, but because you didn't call in, let anyone know you were coming, we weren't really quite prepared
Oh,
for you. But
okay.
we'll see we'll get things worked out. It'll just take us a little while.
Okay.
Okay. Now, everybody brought their bedding and their single bedding.
Well, I'm not sure. John and his wife brought a double bed. They always sleep together.
Oh, well, we're not gonna be able to do that.
Oh,
We'll
my.
put men in one room and women in another.
And they were told that they just assumed that they slept together last time, they'd be all right to do that again this time.
Okay. We don't usually plan for that because if we get crowded, we just can't accommodate
Oh,
that.
okay.
But I have a single cot, an extra single cot. We'll let one of them use that. If
We'll
we
check
can-
with them.
Okay, and if we can find room someplace to put the big double cot for the other one to sleep on, we'll work that out. Okay. Well, probably what we need to do then is have your team come in and we'll fill out their
Okay.
their forms and everything. But
Okay.
in the future, when you're gonna come, if you call in to someone, they'll give you all the stuff that you're supposed to do and to bring, and you notify us, and then we'll be ready for you.
Well, I guess
when
you'll
you
give us
come.
all that information and numbers and so on.
We'll do that.
Okay.
Okay.
You wanna have
Well,
everybody
go get
come
your-
in?
Go get
Okay.
your team,
All right, well,
and we'll set you up over here to get the things.
okay.
I'll go get them and
Bring
bring
them
our
in.
forms. Okay,
Okay.
very good.
All right, thank you.
We'll
Glad to hear your trip is going well. We're expecting you and your team of 3
Hi.
women
Good morning.
and 5
I'm
men
Dusty
to
Gregory.
arrive around
I'm
8.
Linda.
That's where I check in for the team.
Yes, it is.
I'm
So
here
glad
about
you're
4
here.
hours.
We've been expecting you.
Bye-bye.
Is this the paper?
Yes, it is. I had the guys fill them out before we left home, just to make sure they had all their information they needed and stuff, so.
Oh, that
we're
is
done.
wonderful. That is such a big help when you do that.
Okay.
We're so glad you're here. We have everything ready for you. Carol's got your rooms ready to go. I think what we'll do is we'll have her show y'all where to go since you have this filled out. And when you come back, then we'll go over the schedule. I have some maps here for you and some of the facilities. And then you'll come back and we'll introduce you to the White Hat. And he'll give you your assignment and everything for tomorrow.
Okay, well, on the way in, somebody actually called us in the hall and kind of showed us where the shower trailers were. We saw all that stuff and kind of showed us where the guys and the girls' rooms are and told us, and we were given good information before we came, so everybody packed with everything that they need. So I think the team's more concerned with getting settled down and getting some rest. So, but as far as meeting with the White Hat,
Okay, that sounds great. So everybody's got their single cots and mattresses and things
they were
ready to
definitely
go?
given that direction before
Oh,
they left.
that
So
is
everybody should have
wonderful.
everything that they needed
It is
there.
so wonderful when you come prepared. It makes our job much easier and makes the work go so much better. Thank you. Well, now Carol's going to take you down to your facilities and show
Okay.
you where you'll be, and I'll see you again in a little bit.
All right.
Introduce you to your White Hat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
It's good to have you.
Thank you
I'm
very
glad
much.
you're here. Let me show you where we're going.
Thank you very much.
It's been going really well. We've had several people come to know the Lord.
That is great. That is great. Glad to hear it.
Come on
Thank
this
you.
way.
From that video, you've learned how important travel rosters are. Please send travel rosters. Anytime you're deployed, if you know anybody that is deployed, make sure they send travel rosters. Okay, before we get to the next little section, I'd like to mention that we're trying to switch, change our platform from Microsoft Excel to Google platform. which is going to allow us to share documents in real time. It's become very helpful. So a lot of the forms you see now may be a little different by the time you're deployed. They could have been converted or changed a little bit, but they're basically the same information. The check-in roster. This sheet records when volunteers come and go on site. There are 3 tabs at the bottom of this. This file has 3 tabs. You have your DR credentialed volunteers, your day volunteers, and then a total. Upon arrival, the information from their PIP form, depending on which one they filled out, will be entered on the appropriate tab. You mark a 1 for the day on which they arrive on site and for each day that they are on site. You can pre-number these, but if they happen to leave before they said they did, you just go in and adjust it. Or maybe they stayed longer. The daily totals are calculated on the total sheet automatically for you. It is automatically transferred to a daily report for the state director, which we'll talk about later. And right now, Kathy's going to come and talk about status boards.
Thank you for clicking that. I want to tell you a little bit about the status boards that we use on the Google Sheets. It's one of those live forms that Kathy just mentioned. What it does, it helps us with our planning. I'm going to use Lafayette Association, that's mine. So I would put Lafayette Association, our unit number, the blue hat, his cell number, number of men and women, let's say 6 men, 2 women. Well, that could, if that changes, very easily you can change that on the computer, and that's when we have electricity, Wi-Fi. That's the best scenario. So this stays, it stays clean when we make changes, and it's something that all ministry areas can look at and do their planning. If we have, let's say, a cleanup and recovery team with 6 men, 2 women, our cleanup and recovery guy can look at that. He can plan his team, as you know, most women are not, we have a women tractor driver, but most wouldn't. So he would make sure he had a tractor driver or somebody that could do chainsaws. That helps him plan. Also, the type of, when they would get there, when they plan on leaving, so he knows how long he's got them. And any assets they may be bringing. If they have a tractor, that's great. But if they've got a tractor with a grapple hook, that's even better. Or he knows that he has a job that's going to require a crane. Now that's something that we are not fortunate to get very often, but when we do, that's wonderful. That helps him plan. If he knows there's going to be here in 2 weeks, he holds those jobs out in another file to help him plan. Those, say, 6 men and 2 women we talked about, those all go, are calculated. It helps our feeding teams to know how much food they need on certain days. And we know the number that are there on site. We would also list any feeding teams we had coming, shower units, any type teams or units that are coming are documented here, and it's a live document. If I change it right now, in just a minute, everybody can see that change. Now that's when we do have electricity and Wi-Fi and that kind of thing. Now when we don't, we have to switch gears. And let's see if, yep, I actually clicked that right. We have to make a different change, and we have to go to a chart on the wall. Now, if we're very fortunate, we're going to have a whiteboard. If you're really, really lucky, you get a whiteboard with lines on it. And that's great. If they go across, you can keep it nice and neat. Columns are nice and neat. But no matter how straight those lines are and those columns are, if you're writing sloppy, it's not really pretty. So anytime in admin, a neat writing is good. If nobody can read your information, that doesn't work too well. So try to keep it neat, and on the chart on the wall, your changes are not going to be very neat. Now, if you have that whiteboard, you can erase it out and redo it. If we don't have a whiteboard, you go to the big posty posters. We use those and several of them. And when you make that change, just get the regular Post-it and put over it. So it can become quite colorful, but this is a very handy tool. If we are doing the Google Sheets and have it online, that's good. But you can also have this too. It doesn't have to be just if we don't have electricity. because that way, if somebody just walks into a room, they can always see it, and just make sure you keep it updated. They can see it without going back and looking up at the computer for information. So I think that's about it. Like I say, it would have our association, the team name and number, blue hat, cell phone, number of men and women, they're arriving, how long they plan on staying, and any assets that they may have. And that's a great tool. So not a hard job, just one you have to keep updated.
Thank you. Okay. Next, the volunteer hours by area by person, excluding cleanup and recovery. Cleanup and recovery volunteer hours are recorded on with the cleanup and recovery jobs, so they're kept separate. Once you arrive on site, there are blank forms that you can print and give to your ministry area leads. They will keep track of their people every day. They're going to list them on this form, and they're going to bring them to you at a certain time that you specify each day, so you can have it in time for reports. When they bring it to you, you're going to make a copy of it, give them back their original. They can keep that form up to a week or more, depending on how long they're there. Once you have your sheets, you're going to go in here and record them. You're also recording all ministry contacts. You're recording how many meals were served, how many showers were taken, how many assessments were done. All that information is kept on each ministry area. Each ministry area's contacts are different. All these ministry area numbers are automatically combined onto a total sheet, which is used to generate the state director's report each day. And that occurs after your specified time each day. On the cleanup and recovery side, the work request database. This form can be massive. It is not a 3-page document. It is a lengthy document. It's not something that can be printed out, and it's getting bigger all the time. You record all work orders. They're assigned a job number before they go out. The status changes constantly, and it's your goal, should you choose to accept this mission, to keep track of all that paperwork and know where it is at all times. We are currently working on looking at an online assessment work order form, which will be wonderful, we think. Where the admin will do the initial assigning the number, and then they will forward that assessment sheet to the assessor that they can pull up on their tablet, their phone, do their assessment, and once it's done, it populates certain fields within this report. As of right now, once they turn in that hard copy, you do the same thing. You fill in all the forms. And work orders come and go all the time. They will go from it needs to be assessed to when it's ready to work. They didn't get finished, it comes back, it's still ready to work. You keep track of where that piece of paper goes at all times, and what the status of it is every time it comes back. Okay. And all this is maintained online so that the operations lead can see it. Your state director can see it. Anyone they designate that they want to see it would be able to. All the information on the work order database is combined and calculated and submitted on a summary report for the cleanup and recovery operations lead or the state director or whoever he designates. It tracks how many work orders came in that day, how many jobs were done, how many assessments were done, what type of jobs he has remaining, what type of jobs were done today, and it calculates all that for him. Hopefully in the perfect world, you don't have to do any of this. You have to look at it and verify, make sure it looks right, but it should populate for you. And again, that's if we have internet. The work order database also populates into the daily report for the state director. The state director's report has 2 tabs. The first one is strictly cleanup and recovery numbers that came from the database. The second tab is the other volunteer numbers. It totals how many volunteers we have on site, how many day volunteers we've had that day, and all these numbers are day specific. Okay, it says how many meals were served, how many showers were taken, how many contacts were made, how many professions of faith came through. All that information is there, and we can share this information with whoever needs it, which is very helpful. It alleviates us stressing at the end of the day at 6 o'clock that we don't have these figures. But he needs them, within 30 minutes, and we don't have them. This will alleviate some of that, most of it. Okay. If we're using Google Sheets, all this information is in real time, that they can pull it up anytime during the day and see what's happened or where we're at that point. Petty cash that Terry talked about briefly. This report is pretty self-explanatory. There's 2 tabs on this sheet as well. You have one for petty cash and one for the gift cards. Your beginning balances and all the gift cards need to be verified and signed off by 2 witnesses, as well as any time the admin volunteers rotate in and out. You need to verify that these are correct. I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Linda now for our closing comments.
As you can see, there's a lot of work to do in the administration, especially if we're in a large cleanup and recovery site. We thank you for participating in this training. If this is where God leads you to serve, we will welcome you with open arms. And if it isn't, God bless you wherever He decides to send you. Often we're asked why we're here, why we go out. Hopefully it's because we have servant hearts and we want to help others in need. We have a short video that we're going to close with that kind of explains a little bit by why we do what we do. God bless you as you serve.